There comes a moment when you realize the hardest battles aren't fought with the world, but with your own heart. When love, the very thing meant to feel like home, starts feeling like a war zone. You wake up tired, not from work, not from life, but from carrying emotions that drain your peace one breath at a time. You tell yourself it's normal. You tell yourself love requires sacrifice, but deep down you know something is wrong when loving someone costs you your calm, your clarity, your sense of self. This is not a story about blaming love. It's about recognizing the quiet damage that happens when you stay where you are constantly shrinking, when you confuse endurance with loyalty and pain with passion. Tonight, we talk about the strength it takes to walk away from what you once prayed for, the courage to choose peace over attachment, and the truth that real love should never require you to abandon yourself. There's a kind of pain that doesn't scream, it doesn't announce itself with chaos or destruction. It arrives quietly, settles into your routine, and convinces you that this is what love looks like. You wake up and feel heavy before the day even begins, not because life is difficult, but because loving someone has become a constant negotiation with your own peace. You replay conversations in your head, not to understand them, but to fix yourself so you can be easier to love. And over time, without realizing it, you stop asking what you need and start asking what will keep things calm. At first, it doesn't feel dangerous. It feels responsible. You tell yourself you're being mature, patient, understanding. You say love isn't supposed to be easy. You convince yourself that discomfort is proof of commitment. But slowly, the things that once made you feel alive start to fade. You laugh less, you speak less, you think more, you become careful with your words, cautious with your emotions, strategic with your honesty, not because you're dishonest, but because honesty has started to cost too much. You begin to measure your value by how little trouble you cause. You feel proud when you don't react, when you swallow your feelings, when you let things slide. You mistake silence for strength, you mistake endurance for love. And every time you choose peace for the relationship over peace within yourself, something inside you steps back, not all at once, just enough that you don't notice, just enough that you adapt. Love in its purest form doesn't ask you to disappear. But when love costs you your peace, it trains you to become smaller so someone else can remain comfortable. You stop sharing your thoughts because they're misunderstood. You stop expressing your needs because they're seen as demands. You stop explaining your pain because it's labeled as overthinking. Eventually, you stop trusting your own emotions. You start asking yourself if you're too sensitive, too intense, too much. And that question becomes the most damaging one of all. There's a loneliness that exists even when you're not alone. A loneliness that comes from not being seen, not being heard, not being met where you stand. You can be sitting right next to the person you love and still feel miles away from yourself. Because connection without safety isn't connection, it's performance. And when love becomes a performance, you're always exhausted, always alert, always waiting for the next moment you'll have to explain why you feel the way you feel. You tell yourself that everyone has flaws. You remind yourself of the good days, the rare moments when things feel right. You cling to potential, to memories, to promises that sound beautiful but never quite turn into reality. You stay because leaving feels like failure, because walking away feels like giving up, because you've invested time, emotion, hope, and because part of you still believes that if you just love a little better, a little quieter, a little more patiently, things will change. But peace doesn't vanish overnight, it erodes. One dismissed feeling at a time, one ignored boundary at a time, one apology you give for having emotions at all. And the most dangerous part is how normal it starts to feel. You adjust to tension, you adapt to anxiety, you learn how to survive in a state of emotional imbalance and call it love, because admitting the truth would require courage you're not sure you have yet. And love costs you your peace. You start to live in anticipation rather than presence. You anticipate reactions. You anticipate conflict. You anticipate disappointment. Your nervous system is always on guard, always preparing. Even on good days, you're waiting for the shift. And that constant vigilance becomes your baseline. Calm feels unfamiliar. Stability feels boring. You confuse chaos with passion because chaos is what you've learned to manage. You don't leave because you hate them. You don't leave because there's no love. You stay because there is love. And that's what makes it so complicated. Because walking away from something harmful is easy when there's no attachment. Walking away when you still care, when you still hope, when you still remember who they were at the beginning, that's where the real conflict lives. That's where you bargain with yourself. That's where you delay your own healing. There comes a point when you realize you're no longer growing, only coping. You're not building a life, you're managing discomfort. You're not sharing love, you're rationing energy. You start to feel tired in a way sleep can't fix. Because rest doesn't come from closing your eyes, it comes from feeling safe. And safety doesn't exist where your emotions are constantly minimized. Choosing yourself in this moment doesn't make you selfish. It makes you honest about what your heart can carry, honest about what your mind can tolerate, honest about the cost you've been paying quietly. Peace is not something you earn by suffering long enough. It's something you protect by listening to yourself early. And when you ignore that voice long enough, it doesn't disappear. It just grows quieter until one day you barely recognize it. Letting go isn't about proving strength. It's about ending a cycle where love required you to be less than whole. It's about remembering that the version of you before the anxiety, before the self-doubt, before the constant second-guessing, deserved to exist fully. Love should add to your life, not slowly replace it. And when you finally sit with the truth, without excuses, without justifications, without fear of what it means, you understand that peace was never too much to ask for. It was just something you stopped believing you were allowed to have. There is a moment of quiet realization that doesn't come with anger or tears. It comes with clarity, a slow, uncomfortable awareness that what you have been calling patience is actually self-betrayal. That the strength you were so proud of has been used against you. You told yourself you were strong because you could endure. You told yourself you were mature because you could stay calm while everything inside you felt unsettled. But patience, real patience, does not require you to abandon your own needs, and love was never meant to be a test of how much pain you can tolerate without speaking. At first, patience feels noble. It feels like growth. You believe that if you just give it time, things will balance out. You believe that understanding someone means accepting the parts of them that hurt you. You wait, you listen, you forgive, you explain yourself again and again, hoping that clarity will eventually turn into change. And when it doesn't, you don't question the situation. You question yourself. You ask if you're expecting too much, if you're asking at the wrong time, if you're saying it the wrong way. Self-betrayal doesn't look dramatic. It looks responsible. It looks like choosing harmony over honesty. It looks like staying quiet to keep the peace. It looks like minimizing your own pain because someone else has had a hard day, a hard past, a hard life. You learn to delay your emotions until they become easier for others to digest, and by the time you're ready to speak, you don't even know what you feel anymore, just that something inside you feels off. You start to override your instincts. That tight feeling in your chest, that constant unease, that inner voice telling you something isn't right. You label it anxiety, you label it fear, you label it insecurity, anything but the truth, because the truth would mean acknowledging that love is not supposed to feel like constant self-editing. The truth would mean accepting that no amount of patience can fix a situation where respect is missing. There's a subtle shift when patience turns into self-betrayal. You stop reacting naturally and start responding strategically. You calculate how your words might be received before you even say them. You soften your truth so it doesn't sound like an accusation. You apologize before you're even understood. And slowly you train yourself to believe that your feelings are a problem to be managed rather than a message to be heard. You weren't born doubting yourself. That doubt was learned. It came from moments when your honesty was dismissed, when your boundaries were questioned, when your pain was inconvenient. Each time you chose to stay silent, you told yourself it was temporary, that things would improve, that love required compromise, but compromise does not mean consistently choosing yourself last. It does not mean absorbing discomfort so someone else doesn't have to feel it. When you are patient with someone who is trying, patience feels mutual, it feels grounded, it feels hopeful. But when you are patient with someone who is not changing, patience becomes a slow erosion of self-worth. You start measuring progress in crumbs. A good day feels like proof that everything is okay. Even if the bad days are still the majority, you cling to rare moments of connection and use them to justify long stretches of emotional distance. Self-betrayal often hides behind loyalty. You don't want to give up on someone you care about. You don't want to walk away from something you've invested in. You tell yourself that leaving would mean you didn't try hard enough. But there is a difference between trying and losing yourself, between being supportive of ND being invisible, between patience that builds love and patience that drains it. You begin to notice how tired you are, not physically, but emotionally, tired of explaining, tired of waiting, tired of hoping. You feel like you're always adjusting, always understanding, always forgiving, and yet your needs remain unmet, your concerns unresolved, your peace compromised. You wonder why love feels like work all the time, why it feels like you're carrying more than your share. The hardest part about recognizing self-betrayal is accepting that you participated in it, not because you were weak, but because you were hopeful, because you believed in people, because you saw potential, because you loved deeply. And that doesn't make you foolish, it makes you human. But staying once you recognize the pattern requires you to ignore yourself. And every time you do that, the distance between who you are and who you were becoming grows wider. There is no prize for suffering quietly, no reward for enduring pain with grace while your inner world collapses. Love does not ask you to sacrifice your mental health to prove your commitment, and patience should never require you to silence your truth. When you start to feel like you have to earn basic respect, when your boundaries feel like burdens, when your emotions feel like liabilities, something fundamental has been lost. You can care about someone and still acknowledge that the dynamic is unhealthy. You can love someone and still choose to step back. Patience without limits becomes self-neglect, and self-neglect over time turns into resentment. You may not express it outwardly, but it settles inside you. It shows up as numbness, as detachment, as a quiet sadness you can't quite explain. The moment you stop betraying yourself is not loud. It's calm. It's the moment you decide that your feelings matter as much as anyone else's, that your peace is not negotiable, that understanding someone else should never require misunderstanding yourself. And when you finally allow that truth to settle, you realize that patience was never meant to cost you your identity, your voice, or your sense of worth. There is a fear that lives quietly inside many people, the fear that choosing peace will turn them cold, that walking away will harden the heart, that protecting yourself means you no longer believe in love. This fear keeps people trapped long after the joy has faded. It convinces them that suffering is proof of depth, that staying is proof of loyalty, that endurance is proof of character. But choosing peace is not the same as closing your heart. It is learning how to keep it alive. When you have been in a situation where love cost you your peace, your nervous system doesn't forget. Even after the arguments end, even after the words stop hurting, your body remembers. It remembers the tension. It remembers the unpredictability. It remembers how often you had to prepare yourself emotionally. And when you finally step away, the ET can feel unfamiliar. Peace can feel empty at first because you're no longer in survival mode. You're no longer responding to chaos. You're just there. At first, you may mistake calm for loneliness. You may miss the intensity, the highs and lows, the emotional adrenaline, not because it was healthy, but because it was familiar. Your heart became used to proving itself through pain, used to earning affection through patience, used to measuring love by how much you could endure. And when that pattern ends, there's a strange silence where struggle used to live. Choosing peace requires you to relearn yourself. You begin to notice how much energy you were spending managing emotions that weren't yours to carry. You realize how often you were tense without a clear reason, how often you were apologizing for simply existing as you are. And as your body begins to relax, so does your mind. You start to think more clearly. You start to hear your own thoughts again without them being interrupted by fear or anticipation. Keeping your heart open does not mean keeping it unprotected. It means understanding your limits. It means recognizing that love without safety is not intimacy, it is exposure. You can still believe in love while refusing to participate in dynamics that harm you. You can still care deeply without sacrificing your emotional stability. Boundaries are not walls, they are filters. They allow what is healthy to pass through and stop what is not. There is a quiet strength in choosing peace. It doesn't demand validation. It doesn't announce itself. It simply exists. And over time, you begin to notice how differently you show up in the world. You are more present. You listen without bracing yourself. You speak without rehearsing. You laugh without checking if it's the right moment. You become lighter, not because life is easier, but because you are no longer carrying unnecessary weight. You may worry that protecting your peace will make you less compassionate, but true compassion does not require self-destruction. It requires honesty. Compassion without boundaries turns into self-sacrifice, and self-sacrifice, when it is one-sided, breeds resentment. Choosing peace allows you to give from a place of fullness rather than depletion. It allows you to love without losing yourself in the process. There will be moments when you question your decision, moments when memories resurface, moments when you wonder if you could have tried harder, waited longer, loved better. But growth is not about erasing doubt. It's about not letting doubt override your truth. The truth is in how you feel now, the calm in your chest, the clarity in your mind, the absence of constant tension. These are not signs of emotional withdrawal. They are signs of healing. Keeping your heart soft in a world that has hurt you is an act of courage. But softness does not mean availability to harm. It means discernment. It means choosing who has access to your inner world. It means understanding that love should feel like support, not survival. And when you finally accept that, you stop confusing chaos with connection. Peace does not make you indifferent. It makes you grounded. It allows you to respond instead of react, to choose instead of cling, to love without fear of losing yourself. And as you continue forward, you begin to understand that protecting your peace was never about giving up on love. It was about creating the space where real love could finally exist. In the end, choosing peace is not about becoming distant or emotionally unavailable. It is about becoming grounded. It is the moment you stop living in constant reaction and start living with intention, you begin to understand that love was never meant to feel like something you survive. When the chaos fades, your thoughts become clearer, your body relaxes, and your heart no longer feels like it's on guard all the time. That calm is not emptiness, it is healing. Protecting your peace teaches you discernment. You no longer give unlimited access to people who drain you, and you no longer confuse intensity with connection. You realize that real love does not require you to shrink, explain yourself endlessly, or prove your worth through endurance. Peace becomes your standard, not because you are afraid to love, but because you finally respect yourself enough to choose what sustains you. And in that space of calm, your heart doesn't close, it opens in a healthier way. You become capable of deeper connect. Ion, because you are no longer afraid of losing yourself. Love stops being something that costs you your well-being and becomes something that supports it. What you gain is not just distance from pain, but a renewed understanding that peace was never the opposite of love. It was the soil where true love was always meant to grow.